Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll start right away. For those that don't know me, I'm Joel Beatson, Executive Director of Landscape Alberta, and we also manage the Alberta Greenhouse Growers Association. We've been working very closely on COVID-19 response for our members. And so we decided to offer a webinar really focused on the greenhouse and garden center industry, which is where our memberships overlap. So that is going to be the topic for today. Thank you for the question, Tam. Perfect example. I'll try to get that at the end. I believe Val sent you an email about that yesterday, but we'll talk that through at the end for anybody having issues. And welcome questions throughout. I'll try to address them as they come up, but we might just save some till the end as well. So thanks very much, and with that, we'll get started. So the agenda for today is pretty simple. We're going to talk about some of the current situations and what we're dealing with, some key resources for you to access as employers, and then questions and maybe a few answers if possible. I'd also like to apologize now for my COVID-19 beard. It's somewhere between hipster and homeless at the moment, but I'm in a show of solidarity. I'm refusing shaving or haircuts until this is all over. I hope I can look like Tom Hanks and Castaway by the end of it. So some general advice, and we'll talk about the essential service designation, but we're dealing with this, in a broad sense of all small businesses. Staff communication through this seems to be an incredibly key issue. One of the things you have to look at is that it's not just important that you're being safe, it's important that you are appearing to be safe. And that includes, firstly, to your staff, communicating daily or multiple times a day about the protocols you've put in place and why they're there and what else you could be doing. They are your frontline staff and are going to give pretty valuable advice on where that goes. And I think that's very important. I had a friend tell a story out of the southern U.S. A couple of weeks ago, and it was a large retail garden center, about 400 employees in location, as an example, and they ran out of commercial wipes, Lysol or Clorox wipes that they were using to wipe down the sales areas, and they switched to bleach and water solution in a spray bottle and gave everybody disposable towels to wipe down the after thing, but they didn't explain it very well to the employees. And one employee complained on social media that post went viral, like 30,000 shares within 12 hours. And the state authorities came in and closed the entire garden center down, not to reopen until the public health orders have been restricted. So it's there's a lot at stake. So that communication is incredibly vital with your staff, making sure not only that they are comfortable, but also that they are comfortable to communicate the precautions and policies and procedures you've put in place to your customers. Same thing goes with your customers. It's not just important that you do these things, it's important that you communicate them to your customers ahead of their visit to your garden center or greenhouse. If you're a wholesaler, communicating to all of the people you sell to what procedures you've put in place and how important a priority you've put on that. Neighbors count, especially if your garden center is more urban in nature. If you have people that can see your parking lot and see your facilities, you need to be very aware that the complaints could come from there. And then that leads to the last thing, which is ultimately this comes down to enforcement officers are going to be the ones that decide how and when you're in trouble, and whether that's an Alberta Health Services inspector, whether that's a RCMP officer or city police officer, or whether that's an occupational health and safety officer. Those people are the ones that are going to decide. And, just like enforcement at any level, it's going to be different a little bit between individuals. So you want to be sure you're doing probably a little more than's required, so you can really push that through. And then I guess the second column here, we're talking, cash is king right now in the garden center industry. Um, uh, this is the cash making time of year, so you really you want to make sure that that's solid. Going to and I mean cash is in terms of your cash flow in your business, not actual cash, because we should all be going contactless for payment. But I think that's an important thing is paying attention to your receivables at this time of year, and really making sure you're getting paid very quickly, because all small businesses are being asked to hold on to as much cash as possible to make sure they have the resources to make it through this. Leaders being seen and heard. I know I've talked to a lot of garden center and retail greenhouse people that are spending even more time in the greenhouse, especially early in the season, to make sure these procedures are working, to make sure their employees understand how much they care. Some of us maybe have a tendency to hide when things get tough, or try to retreat and hunker down, and it's probably not the time to do that now. Anything we present here, anything I'm talking about today, the funny part is that it's not changing as fast as it was, even 2 weeks ago, but it's changing. It does change pretty frequently still, and so be prepared to pivot and change, and new procedures or new health directives might come out, and they might apply to you, and you might have to pivot again and keep going. But I think we're pretty lucky here in Alberta, and perhaps the prairies as a whole, with our late spring this year. Our friends in British Columbia, as an example, we're having a very strong early spring, and then completely the bottom sort of completely fell out, but because they didn't have time to adapt and think ahead of opening for the season. I'm just so impressed with how Alberta members have responded to this in terms of looking at ways to adapt and be innovative. But it helped because we didn't have customers in the stores. We didn't have orders going out right away. We had a little time to consider this and to adapt our business practices, which is would hopefully set us up well. And then the last part about public health directives, and I'll just repeat this again and again and again throughout this webinar, hopefully, is that although ultimately those public health directives are the end all be all when it comes to this, so you have to be in compliance with those. They should be the only ones you're really considering when it comes to this. So the current situation, we did get the notice, I believe on April 9th or 10th, about essential service mattering for garden centers and greenhouse retailers, but also extending all the way back to the value chain, to the farms that grow our facilities. It was a little unclear and gray in the first release. Landscape Alberta and AGGA worked incredibly well together, and I'd like to thank Anna DePauli, who's an advocacy consultant that AGGA uses, and I know we probably talked 5 or 6 times a day for a couple of weeks, both with 5 and 3-year-olds in the house. So I really want to thank her for that. She was incredible to work with, and I think together we really drove this home and made that happen. The essential service is, and I've got this up on the slide. There's a couple. April 7th from Hanja. Yeah, thanks, Justin. And the Minister of Ag's letter was the one that really confirmed in writing that we had this. And so I got that, I believe, about 7. The notice about essential service about 7 o'clock on the Thursday before Good Friday, which really did make it a Good Friday. A lot of great hard work that went into that, and early enough that we were able to keep going. One thing to notice is that, or to bring attention to, is that Alberta has an essential list, but it also has a prohibited list, and the prohibited list includes things like giftware and clothing, which in some garden centers that's a product line or product lines they do sell. So our advice at this point is, although we're essential services, you do have to make sure you're not selling prohibited services at the same time. And other prohibited services are, massages, haircuts, and those kind of things where they've completely shut down those industries. But it also is incredibly important to remember that essential service does not give carte blanche. It does not mean you have an absolute right to be open or to operate as normal. Anything that's on the essential list still has to consider all of the public health directives and make sure that they're following those. So it is an incredible privilege, especially when we look to other areas of North America, including Ontario, where all garden centers in Ontario, as an example, can do pickup, a curbside pickup and delivery only. They cannot be open to the public at all right now. And they're a few weeks ahead of us in spring. So you can imagine how devastating that currently is. And so really focusing on what is essential part of your business, and then trying to make sure you service that. Shirley asked the question about where can you find the list of prohibited services. If you search the essential list, on the Alberta government website, the prohibited list is included in there, and we've linked that in the AGGA member resource section, which I'll get to. We have both associations have resource sections available, which where we do link to those exact lists, etc. And so that's my next slide. Yay! And so there's a couple of the key resources, and I think this is the thing we've heard a lot from members is there's just so much information, and then so is the associations. We've been trying to compile that in a way that's easy to use. The Alberta Greenhouse Growers Association has a section up on their website. You can see a screen capture of that there. We also have one up at the Landscape Alberta website, where you can access all of these things. We've tried to break them into categories, make it easier to follow along with and understand. And then we're also working on the next stage is a pandemic planning guide, more of a manual with a really excellent table of contents, so that you can just access those things incredibly easy, because it is a sort of a never-ending guide there. And so some of the stuff we have up there is some tips and tricks for garden centers and retail greenhouses. Document, we have access to all of the hand washing protocols and information from Alberta Health Services, posters for your businesses. We have some potential signage for you to put up in your garden centers and greenhouses, and links to all those kind of protocols, and then all the other federal programs and provincial programs as they become available. And I'll just encourage anyone here too, is that especially, if you're a member of either association or both, we have a lot of shared members as well. If you're a member of that, please reach out and contact us with your questions. This is pretty singularly the focus of the association at the moment. So we really do want to help, and there's a couple of staff, Lisa and Valerie, both on the webinar this morning, helping with questions in the side box. And so if you have any questions, we do want to talk to you, and we're here to help you. We might not have the answers, but we maybe can help you get them and let you focus on your business instead of talking to government. So, and thanks, Justin. About the giftware, the limited amount of touching. I've talked to some garden centers on what they can sell there. It should be garden related, so pots might be okay. Where something like patio furniture might be harder to do. I know one garden center down in Calgary has created a patio center display area, which people can't come within 6 feet of, and then they can add that to their cart online or at the till, and they'll load it in for them. But no touching from the customers, because you have fabrics and nice little porous crevices and patio furniture as an example that might be a problem. So I mean, again, they're all best practices and need to be tested. Is one inspector might be okay with it, and the next one might not. So you and a customer might complain about it, which might lead to a a temporary or shut down or interruption in business. So it's about making sure you're not just being safe, but do that. Yeah, you can. Yeah, selling it Yeah, I should put a caveat on that. Selling anything curbside or for delivery is no problem. So thank you for that. Good point, Cindy. We can't tell the government why big box stores can sell non-essentials and you can't. What we're doing is giving advice is that they have said those sales are prohibited, and again, it comes down to, I guess, customer complaints. If people want to complain at Costco that the clothing section should be closed, then I would suspect that it would soon be closed. So federal and there's been a couple of changes in the last couple of days, which maybe don't show up in here, but we'll deal with this. Is the federal programs for your business, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, which is two parts. There's a 10% wage subsidy that is it doesn't have as many strings attached, and then there's a 75% wage subsidy, which relates to having a 30% loss in revenue for April, May, and June, and you can go 15% in March. So those are excellent programs. But you do have to show that loss in revenue. The extending the work sharing program, which is an EI type program, which allows you to reduce people's hours, maybe to 2 or 3 days a week, 50% week, and they get 50% salary from you and are topped up with EI. So that's for some businesses that could be an excellent program. The Canada Summer Jobs Program, and they just announced some more money for that. But the Canada Summer Job Program has been around for a long time. It used to pay 50% of student wages, and that's now been increased to 100% up to or for minimum wage for salaries. So it's an excellent program to maybe bring some students in the summer. As an example, as the association, we're maybe going to look at it as somebody to come in and do some work on our websites and back end stuff that they could work remotely, and we get a great value out of it over the summer, and give a young person a job through these tough times too. The income tax and GST deferrals, great ways to keep cash in your pockets. There's business credit available through BDC, those kind of things. The Canada Emergency Business Account, which Tam did ask about in the chat earlier, so I guess we can cover that now, is also called CEBA, is a $40,000 loan. We looked into this issue. Is it appears that RBC is giving an excuse about being a sole proprietor as not being able to access that thing. We find there's no evidence that they're restricting that to sole proprietor, so I'm not sure if that's a RBC problem or a Government of Canada problem. But we're going to so I think the Summer Jam program should still be open. It might be a special link for this year, so I'll double check on that after the webinar, and we'll make sure to give an update. But my understanding it's still open. Sorry, because they announced the increase to the 100% wage after February 28th, because all of these announcements came after. So I'll double check that. And then there's SOP funding now available, $1,500 per seasonal agricultural worker that comes into your farm. There's no information on the application, I believe, at this point, but we're going to do that. And then I'll actually go back to I should go back to the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. 2 days ago, we came across, they finally released the application, and one of the caveats in the application is about arm's length employees. So direct family members cannot cannot receive the wage subsidy, which is a huge problem for probably all farm businesses, but especially any small businesses in Canada. So we're actually talking to our national association has brought the question forward to ESDC today. So we're hoping to get some better answers on that pretty early. For the employees and self-employed people, there's those changes to EI. And I guess we're about to launch into season, so maybe these are a little less relevant now. But if you have if there's a loss in jobs for your employees, making sure that you pass these resources on to them are pretty good. The CERB, which is well publicized, and it was expanding to students as announced yesterday. The Canada Child Benefit, GST credit repayments, both of those require you to file your taxes pretty fast and get on them. And then extra time to submit your income taxes if you need it. There's the mortgage supports they talked about, student loan deferrals, lots of lovely stuff to try to help people out. Provincial, the ATB loan deferrals, which I think count not just mortgage, but line of credit and equipment, those kind of things, vehicle loans, some corporate income tax changes in terms of submitting those and having some deferral on that, the education property tax. The province has decided not to put that increase through, which helps. And I would check with your, I'm going to advise you, everyone check with their municipality, but a lot of municipalities across Alberta, I don't have the full list. I don't have the full list, but many municipalities are deferring your corporate income tax or your corporate property taxes. So check with your local municipality if that's something you want to do. WCB premium payment deferral, so that puts, I believe it puts it off over a year for when you have to pay your WCB premiums. Again, all of these things are really about keeping cash in your pocket and making sure you've got some liquidity in your business. Utility payment deferrals. Some of the changes around employment standard leaves, there's a new class of job protected leave, so you can if people are either sick or have to care for someone who's sick, you will have to you have to provide a protected leave so that they can come back. They removed the 24-hour notice to schedule changes, which is great in this time where things are constantly changing. And God forbid you have a staff that gets sick, you'll be able to do that. Changes to mass layoff notices, not providing as much time, and then the temporary layoff going from 60 days to 120 days. So hopefully that doesn't apply to many people if we have a good season, but it's there. And then we link to all of this stuff in our resource guide for more information, and we're working on another webinar coming up that'll go through really hands-on specific on the on some of those federal programs and access to those. But it's they're quite complex and changing every day. So looking to the Alberta Health Services and the Chief Medical Officer of Health are really the end all be all of this stuff. So we've got to make sure you're paying attention to what they're saying. Occupational Health and Safety Act is still in place, so you still have to be aware of that. And we understand that sometimes those two things might conflict. So it'll and when they do, please try to get your question into us about those type of things so we can seek clarity. And then looking at Health Canada and the World Health Organization, making sure your information about COVID-19 is vetted and properly involved. So and here's a great resource that we came across, and it's included in there, but great for staff training about how long things can be touched or and how long the virus might live on those things. Obviously the glass being, things like your doors to your greenhouses, the walls to them, and phones and other devices seem to have the longest touch timeline. So you wanna really uh, use this to help determine your sanitization schedule, etc. Um, Debbie just asked, are there any limits to having teens working? It would be the same limits. They haven't changed any of the employment standards around teenage work, so it would be the same employment standards that existed last year as well. No, nothing new there. And then sector-specific guidance. We're really trying to call them guidances or best practices. Again, many haven't been tested, but we're acting maybe a little bit as a housing ground for putting the best ideas we're hearing in one place and trying to give people the best method for doing that. So when it comes to whether it's wholesale greenhouses or vegetable greenhouses, limiting access to your facility to employees only is going to be a strong one. One of the best ones I heard, I believe earlier this week, was employees having a change of clothes so that they're not bringing their work clothes home and they're not bringing their home clothes to work. That could be an excellent thing. Many employers right now are looking to do daily health checks with all employees, and that can just be from a checkpoint where they have to basically answer a short set of questions about if they're, if they have a fever, if they're feeling if they have any symptoms, are they coming into contact with anybody with any symptoms before they start work every day, so you can try to control that. And then and some employers have gone so far as to have infrared temperature guns, and then they check people for fevers every single day to see if to ensure safety there. So those are the things. Also looking at having different shift start times to delay that influx of people into your greenhouses is important. Maybe adding a shift or doing split shifts. More space on the packing and planting lines if possible. Many of them are very defined and set up, so I know that's hard, but if you have the ability to do that. And then the one I've heard too is that, especially at the wholesale level, is that many delivery drivers coming and going, making sure they have a dedicated bathroom for them, but it's separated from the ones you maybe use for your other staff to ensure that you're reducing the amount of touches. On the retail side, we've got some advice very specifically from the government of Alberta, ensuring that patrons and volunteers maintain that physical distancing or social distancing, 2 meters, 6.5 feet, wherever possible. I think that is one of the absolute key ones. Same idea, prohibiting entry to any worker, volunteer, or patron who is sick or self-isolating. Limiting the number of workers, volunteers, and customers in the greenhouse at any one time. And so that's the number one question we've gotten about this is related to the how many customers can I have in my greenhouse. It's not a known number. The Alberta government hasn't given us an exact number, but what it comes down to is what is the number depending on your size, layout, amount of bottlenecks that exist in your greenhouse that you can maintain safe social distancing inside your store. That's going to be a little different for every greenhouse and garden center, but it's up to you to figure out what that is. What we're advising people is to be a little more cautious than cavalier when it comes to that. Is if you think it could be 30, maybe 20 is a good way to do that, but to adjust over time. If you're finding customers just aren't following it, or you don't have them at staff to maintain it or monitor how social distancing is happening in your store, then you might want to reduce those numbers again. In Saskatchewan, though, they've given much more detailed requirements for retail garden centers and greenhouses to be open, and one of them which I think is a useful rule of thumb, is one customer per 1,000 square feet, 1,000 square feet of sales space. A bit of a tongue twister, but it might be a good rule of thumb is that if you've got 20 or 30, 30,000 square feet of sales space, that could be 30 customers is safe, and you might want to judge it back from there. But again, you're really going to have to make the call on the side of safety when it's come to that. One-way traffic flow is as Justin just mentioned in comments, is on my list, and one of the things that's you're starting to see a lot of places do. I'm surprised more grocery stores haven't absolutely mandated one-way traffic flow, because the aisles in most retail spaces are just not large enough to have people going both directions at the same time. Even if they're wide enough, they're not wide enough to maintain that social distance. So it's that is an excellent best practice. Yeah, maintaining social distancing is probably the number one thing, and then increased sanitization, making sure hand washing is available. All of those things are good. One of the other ones the government's recommended is limiting hours of operation, and which might seem counterintuitive, because it means you're going to have more customers compressed to smaller scales. But I think it comes down to a session, or it comes down to the optics, which is by reducing your hours slightly, it means you have time for proper sanitization to occur when there's no customers around. It keeps staff more comfortable. It ensures customers understand you are taking time every day to make sure proper sanitization is happening. And then this other great one is pursuing options to facilitate prepayment online, delivery of orders, curbside pickup, etc. And I know almost everybody has considered some level of that, and but trying to make sure that that's a pretty feasible part of your operation could be quite good. And then regular cleaning and disinfection of any surfaces or equipment touched by workers or customers. Which goes without saying. And so the higher the touch the area, the more sanitation it's going to require. But there's going to be areas that that you're going to have to pay more attention to than others. But regular daily sanitization is probably a very strong possibility. So those are some of the big ones. We've developed with our national association, the Canadian Nursery and Landscape Association, and their Garden Centers Canada Commodity Group, a list of bigger best practices. But those are the big ones. Oh, I'm missing one of the other big ones. The second biggest question, and maybe we get to the questions. I have that up there. Is I've already talked about how many customers. And so I think I've covered that, unless someone else has more questions. And then the second biggest question we get is access to public washrooms for customers. Our general advice has been to close use of those washrooms, following the best practices we see in other industries open to the public. There's obviously always going to be an exception, but the caveat would be after each customer would have to require full sanitization. And it's whether you have the resources to provide that kind of, having a single employee sanitize the bathroom, I'll do nothing but sanitize bathrooms all day, might be problematic. So I think it's some common sense there is probably good. If someone's having a true emergency, then that makes sense. But it's people, it is an area of concern, I know, for Alberta Health Services. And then we talked about the type of products earlier, which is, if you look at that, the prohibited list is not selling those where customers can touch them. If it's for online order or pickup or curbside delivery, then that can be an excellent add-on to any order, but it's there. So I'm open to questions and answers here. I'm looking back. I think we've I see two questions remarked about the Canada summer jobs. Again, I'll have to double check into that, but because they announced the changes to the program after February 28th, I would assume there's an alternate way to apply. We will do some research post call today and see what we can come up with. We got a question about the CEBA program again. We'll see if we can talk to Royal Bank, but I one of the feelings we've had, and we've heard reports of it in other areas as well with other banks, is some banks have added their own rules and regulations, which are not allowed by government, but might still be trying to put it in. So my gut tells me that that is what might be happening there, and so we'll try to talk to Royal Bank. We have a relationship with them already, and see if we can track down what might be going on there. We have a question here from Isabel about foreign workers already on site since January. Are we aware if there's any flexibility in keeping them longer than the 8 months instead of having new ones coming in? That's a very good question. I don't have an answer for that, Isabel. We will follow up with that after the call to ensure we do have an answer as that goes in. Frankly, I don't think they have an answer on it right now, but it's an excellent question. The longer we go into the season, that we should have some kind of clarity on that. They've been maybe singularly focused on ensuring the workers get here and that they're safe once they get here. Has been their focus. So as workers are really starting to arrive in Alberta, I think starting this week or end of last week, from that spring input, and then we'll see where that goes. But excellent question. So I'm not seeing any other questions in chat, but we're welcome to hang around for a couple of minutes and talk about it. We're also working on some. When I go back to those resource center, I like to see this pretty optimistic approach to this. Is in both areas you'll find some good marketing materials that we're happy to share. The National Garden Council, I believe, is the group, has redone a bunch of the Victory Garden artwork, all for Victory Garden 2.0. Really pushing that grow food at home gardening, which we're hearing is just going mad in the southern U.S. right now. And then and that's all free for use, all perfect for social media. And then our friends at the Texas Nursery Landscape Association, and my friend Amy, who is the executive director there, they went and developed an entire line of resources that are based around the idea of embrace your space, and getting people out gardening at their homes. And I approached her about licensing use to those things so we could give them away to our members. And amazingly, she just said, you absolutely share it with anyone. Anyone can use it free of charge. And it is a very interesting pulling together of associations right across North America to do this. And then the other, maybe I shouldn't share it, but I think it's just absolutely excellent news, is we're all part of our North American network of associations is a really large garden center group in the southern 12 or 13, 14 states or something like that. And they track sales rate and all but Michigan and Ohio were either flat sales or considerably up, like double-digit up in sales. So it's if we hope to repeat what they're doing in the U.S., is it actually looking very positive for garden sales this spring. So being able to stay open is just purely hoping. And I don't know if everyone can fully see the chat, but Shirley asked about sanitizer being available. We're actually going to be putting out a resource list very shortly about that. And then one of our members, Paul Doof, whose brother is involved in Blind Man Brewing, so it's all in the family here, is making sanitizers. So, and I think a lot of the local breweries and distilleries have started using their bottling lines to make sanitizers. So I would advise people to check that out. And maybe the other good, I just thought, and just thinking about this off the top of my head, the other good news, I was talking to a friend of mine in Ontario last night, and he's having a real problem trying to get liquor delivered to his house. And I told him in Alberta, all the breweries and distilleries are doing, next day free delivery. And he was quite upset and said Ontario's in the dark ages. So that'll be an interesting thing. The signage on the site is for AGGA, you have to be a member of the Alberta Greenhouse Growers Association and log in. And if you're not a member of AGGA but still want to access it, Landscape Alberta has made it available to non-members as well. And there's a button that'll refer to signage, and you go there. And if you're having troubles finding it, just call us and let us know. So thanks everybody. And there's one other one. When going back to the hand sanitizers, is that somebody got one from Greg Distributors, so we're going to add those to the list. We're doing a list of where to look for those things from local suppliers for industry. So that'll come out soon, in the next day or so. So thank you everybody. I know about 40 minutes. Not as many questions and answers as I maybe suspected, but again, the Alberta Greenhouse Growers Association thanks you for being involved here. And if you have any questions, please call our office. We're happy to help or try to help find you the answer. And then I just wish you the best for the season, and I hope everyone stays safe and happy, and we'll go from there. So all the best, people. Take care. Bye.